The city roared beneath the storm, glass towers slicing through clouds heavy with rain. Lightning carved brief scars across the skyline, exposing the pulse of a world that thrived on secrets. Inside that glittering chaos, Amara Grant moved like a shadow. No one noticed. Through once every camera had adored her face. She had entered the tallest building with shaking hands and left it hollow eyed. The echo of betrayal still burning in her chest. The elevator ride down had felt endless, each floor sliding past like the collapse of another illusion. By the time the doors opened to the street, she no longer recognized the woman reflected in the chrome. Cold rain struck her skin, but she barely felt it. Anger insulated her sharp and bright. So, this is what power looks like. She thought it smiles while it erases you. She walked without destination, her heels splashing through gutters until the rhythm steadied her heartbeat. Somewhere inside the storm, the truth began forming small, vicious, undeniable. She would not back, and she would not disappear. If the man who had taken everything believed she would stay silent, he had never understood the kind of silence that grows teeth. By dawn, she reached her apartment. The air smelled of wet concrete and stale ambition. She stripped off the soaked dress, wrapped herself in a blanket, and stared at the blank glow of her laptop. Beneath the furry and older instinct stride the investigative mind she had buried when she chooses love over magic. Journalism had once been her weapon. Tonight it would become her salvation. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, resurrecting forgotten logins, tracing corporate trails, old interviews, charity artists, the screen filled with polished lies. Every headline prized the empire she had helped build through blind affection. But there was always a fracture beneath perfection, and Amara knew how to find it. Hours blurred, coffee replaced sleep. When her eyes began to ache, she leaned back and whispered to the ceiling of a small room, not as a plea but a vow. She would expose the road that wrote a billionaire's smile. She started digging through the financial records of Collins Industries, donations that circled back into hidden subsidiaries, shell companies registered in countries that barely existed on maps. The deeper she searched, the clearer the patterns became. The empire was not built on innovation, it was built on disappearance of money, of people, of anyone who asked questions. Her heartbeat quickened, fear followed close behind, but it no longer stopped her. It sharpened her focus. She could almost hear his voice somewhere in the static of memory, smooth, careful, rehearsed, and the thought fueled her. Outside the storm intensified, inside another gathered. When dawn bled through the blinds, Amara had traced a line from the company's charitable foundation to a private lab project labeled only AG, her initials. For a second, she thought exhaustion was playing tricks. But the code appeared again and again across encrypted transfers. The coincidence was too precise. Something could slid down her spine. The man she had trusted had not just betrayed her, he had been studying her. Morning light slashed through the blinds, too clean for the fifth she had just uncovered. Amara's apartment felt smaller than it ever had. The air thick with the static of secrets. Her eyes, red from hours without rest, stayed locked on the folder marked AG. Every keystroke opened another layer of betrayal. Photographs appeared first, grainy shots of her taken years before she met him. Her old newsroom, the street outside her mother's house, even the park bench where she used to read during lunch breaks. Someone had watched her life like a documentary of prey. The next files were psychological profiles, line of clinical tests dissected her personality, predicting reactions, weakness, loyalty, thresholds. Each paragraph felt like a theft of something scared. Her mind, her choices, her humanity. Beneath the technical jargon ran a single phrase repeated across pages. Subject AG selected for emotional leverage. She scrolled until nausea rose. The company she had loved in him, the world he had built, had chosen her long before she ever believed in fate. Nothing had been chance. Every touch, every promise, every perfect coincidence has been written in one report. Her reflection in the screen looked like a stranger, eyes wide, mouth thin line carved by disbelief. For a heartbeat, she considered closing everything, pretending ignorance, but ignorance was what he counted on. Fear was what kept everyone silent. She copied the data to a hidden drive and shoved it into the lining of her jacket. She would need evidence, but she would also need to stay alive long enough to use it. Evening crawled in unnoticed. The rain returned, gentler now, almost sympathetic. She tried to rest, but sleep came jagged and brief. Somewhere between dreams and alarms, the smell of smoke woke her. Flames licked the hallway before she could reach the door. The fire spread fast, too fast for an incident. Heart punched through the thin walls, devouring photographs, papers, everything that tied her to her old life. She grabbed the jacket, broke a window, and dropped into an alley 2 floors below. Pain shot through her ankle, but adrenaline drowned it. Behind her, the apartment erupted. The roar of collapsing wood drowned by the city noise. She stood in the rain, watching the orange bloom of destruction reflect in every window around her. The message was clear and deliberate. Someone wanted her erased. Smoke curled around her like a warning whisper. She felt the order self burning with the rest of it. The hopeful journalist, the lover, the woman who believed justice arrived through truth alone. But Roses in the Ashes was colder, quieter, more precise. By dawn she vanished. Credit cards cancelled, phone destroyed, name erased from every registry that still spelled it correctly. The woman who walked out of the city wore different face. Haircut short, dyed dark, a new passport carrying the name Elena was. The months that followed became a blur of motion and learning. She studied finance, cybersecurity, corporate espionage, the language of predators. Each skill was a blade she forged in silence. Each sunrise reminded her that survival was no longer enough. Revenge demanded patience. Every night she replayed the same thought until it hardened into belief. Power of feeds on fear, but power of also bleeds when struck from inside. If she wanted to dismantle his empire, she would become part of it. 6 months later, the chance arrived disguised as coincidence. A requirement notice for new public reaction strategist at Collins Industries. The irony almost made her smile. The empire was calling back the ghost it had tried to kill. Alina Vos walked through the mirrored lobby of Collins Industries with the confidence of someone who had never bled. The security guard scanned her badge, unaware that the woman behind the corporate smile carried an identity made from ashes. Beneath the tailored suit and calm pulse, Amara's heartbeat waited, counting every step that brought her closer to the man who thought he had buried her. The building had not changed, still glass, steel, and ambition, but the air smelled different now. Once it had smelled like admiration, now it reeked of fraud she alone could sense. The upper floors gleamed with success stories, the lower ones had rooms that never appeared on blueprints. She memorized every face, every camera angle, every hallway that could be used to vanish a person. Weeks folded into a rhythm of performance. Alina was efficient, invisible, essential. She handled statements, covered scandals, and lured the empire's heartbeat until she could predict its next move. Her desk faced the skyline, a constant reminder that the higher she climbed, the thinner the air became. Her nights belonged to hunt. When the office light dimmed, she remained searching through encrypted servers, bypassing firewalls, slipping into the digital veins of Collins Industries. The files spoke in patterns, falsified reports, hidden subsidiaries, coded transactions following to a black account labeled June Archives. Every discovery felt like opening a locked door inside a nightmare she already knew by heart. One evening, fatigue sharpened into focus. Buried deep within the June archives, she found a video file without metadata. No date, no owner, no trace of its creation. Curiosity overrode caution. The file opened to a grainy recording of Richard's office at night. Two figures stood locked in confrontation, their movements jerky under the security feed's low frame rate. The sound was missing, but violence needed no translation. A struggle, a fall, a motionless body, then darkness. For a long minute, she could not breathe. Her mind refused to match the silhouette on the floor with the memory she cared about. The camera caught the light across a familiar watch band, and the denial shattered. It was not Queenie, the only person who had ever warned her what Collins could do. The video froze her on the last frame, the body dragged out of sight. Shock became a kind of silence that screamed inside her. She replayed the footage until the pixels blurred, trying to believe it could be altered, staged, false. But truth rarely needed clarity. Truth just waited for courage to look back. The longer she stared, the colder she grew. That revenge she had planned felt suddenly inadequate. This was not about betrayal anymore, this was murder wrapped in privilege. Hours later, another discovery came like an aftershock. In the reflection of the office glass, faint but undeniable was a figure standing by the doorway. Female motion blurred, holding a phone, her own face caught in the periphery of a moment she had never understood. The night Noah died also being the night she went to that building setting. She was being stood up for a meeting that never happened. She had left after a few minutes frustrated. Now she saw that she had been there along a witness without knowledge. Her hands trembled as the realization unfolded. The file was never meant to be hidden. It was by Richard had left it buried where only she would look. Every step she had taken since her rebirth, every trace she believed she erased, had already been predicted. The ghost in his system was never haunting him. She had built the system for her. The thoughts slid through her mind like ice water. She shut the computer, erased her digital footprints, and sat in the darkness of her office. The skyline blinked outside indifferent. Somewhere high above in the penthouse where watched the city sleep. Richard might already know she was here. Fear returned, not that kind that froze, but the kind of sharpened every sense. She could feel his presence like static in the air. The silence of the office pressed against her ears until she realized it was not silence at all. It was the faint hum of a phone vibrating inside her bag. The screen glowed with an unlisted number on message waited. No name, no greeting, just words that turned her veins to glass. You have come far, but the game isn't over. Her heart slammed once hard enough to echo. The lights flickered somewhere in the corridor. A motion sensor triggered through. No one could have been moving. The air thickened with the electricity of a trap closing. Amara rose steady, calculating. The elevator at the end of the hall came, its door sliding open to an empty cabin. The security cameras above blinked red and then died. She knew then that the past was not finished with her. The man who had built her cage was stepping back into view. The first part of her war had ended with a fire. The second was beginning in the dark. The morning came without mercy. Dawn slipped through the blinds of Amara apartments, cutting the room into pale stripes of light and shadow. The city outside pulsed with life, unaware that a great war had already begun. She had not slept, her body sat still, but her mind had moved through 1,000 memories, betrayal, humiliation, and now the taste of revelation. Somewhere Richard Collins was awake too. She knew the type. Men like him didn't rest. They calculated, they didn't dream. They planned. She imagined him sipping imported coffee, reading the financial reports, and waiting for her to make her next move. He thought she was pawn returning to the port he once controlled. But pawns that come back from the dead don't move by the old rules. Amara had spent years running from what he had done to her, but now he ran toward it. The pain he gave her had stopped being a wound, it was now a weapon. Every part of her life, the betrayal, the loss, even her transformation into Elena Vos had been rehearsal for this day. She opened her laptop, the glow washing over her dried face. Dozens of encrypted drives waited, pieces of a map only she could read. Data was the bloodline of Collins Industries, and she had learned how to poison it slowly. She began rewriting transaction logs, planting phantom signatures, fake accounts, and redacting memos that would later explode themselves like time bombs. Her revenge was not about public humiliation. It was about erosion, slow, invisible destruction that left the victim doubting his own power. By the time the office lights flickered on that morning, Alina was already there, composed, efficient, and invisible among hundreds of employees. She wrote her mask with elegance, her hair tied neatly, her voice calm, her posture unshakable. Beneath that polished image, her thoughts hissed with the venom of patience. She studied Richard from afar during meetings, the way he moved, precise, dominant, untouchable. The boardroom obeyed him like a king commanding silence. No one dared looking him in the eye too long. Yet she noticed something small and something no one else saw. His left hand trembled slightly when he turned pages, a human glitch weakness wearing a perfect suit. It was the first crack in his armor. That evening, when the building emptied again, she slipped into the archive floor, a silent labyrinth of glass and serves. Every hum of electricity felt like a heartbeat under her control. Her plan was simple: to trace the hidden trial behind the June archives, the file that showed Noah's death. She found more files marked with random dates, meaningless at first, until she realized each date matched the disappearance of someone who had worked closely with Richard in the past decade. Accountant, assistant, journalist, even a legal consultant. Each had vanished quickly. The reports have been sealed as confidential statements of personal reasons. But Amara saw the pattern of each of them had gotten too close to one truth. The truth about Richard's empire not being built on profit but on silence. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. Inside her chest something burned. How many lives had he bought with fear? She thought. How many people were buried beneath his success stories? She remembered Noah's word, his warning back then. She did not understood what he meant when he said, Collins doesn't destroy people, he erases them. Now she understood it completely, but she would not be erased now this time. The next phase of her plan began quickly. She started leaving traces of corruption in places where Richard's own team would find them. A missing signature, an unexplained transfer, a misfiled report that contradicted his statement. Each clue was small enough to seem accidental, but together they formed a noose. Inside his empire, trust began to crack. Board members whispered in corridors, emails went missing, investors grew nervous, the worst drop of chaos had landed, and Amara felt it rippled outward like a storm brewing behind glass. Still, she was not satisfied. She wanted him to feel what she had felt: confusion, doubt, the creeping sense that someone unseen was closing in. That night, she visited the rooftop of her apartment. The city lights glittered below, and the wind carried the faint hum of sirens. She stood there watching the skyline, her thoughts heavy but fierce. He took everything from me, she told herself silently. Now I will take certainly his empire, his peace. But beneath that resolve, another emotion stirred, fear, not of Richard but of herself. The longer she planned his downfall, the more she realized how far she had drifted from the woman she once was. Her heart used to break, now it calculated. Her grief used to drown her, now it guided her hand like a compass pointing toward vengeance. Was she avenging Noah's death or simply feeding the hunger Richard had created inside? She did not know, and maybe she didn't care anymore. In the following weeks, her digital attacks deepened. She rerouted financial flows through offshore accounts, each one leading back to Richard's personal name. To the world, it would soon appear as thought he was laundering his own fortune, and the evidence would be undeniable. He had been destroyed by the same system he had built to protect himself. Yet the deeper she went, the more she felt worse. Documents she had encrypted began unlocking on their own. Her passwords were mysteriously reset, and one morning a small black envelope appeared on her desk. No name, no return address, just a single photograph inside. It was a picture of her apartment building taken from across the street, taken the night before. Her chest went cold. She turned the photo over, nothing written, but she did not need words. The message was clear. He knows that night she couldn't eat, couldn't think. Every sound in her apartment became a threat: the creak of wood, the hum of a passing car, the ticking clock. She sat in darkness, her back against the wall, the photograph clutched in her hand.